Welcome back to Introduction to Python. In this tutorial, we'll be going over Python operators, variable types, assigning variables, commenting, predefined functions, modules, local variables, creating functions, and if statements. So let's start with operators. Now, in this tutorial, we'll only be going over the simple ones, such as arithmetic and comparison operators. So, for example, there is addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, remainder, and exponent. So for addition, let's say you wanted to do 2 plus 4. This would return 6. If we were to do subtraction, 2 minus 4, this would return negative 2. If you were to do multiplication, 2 times 4, this would return 8. Division, such as 4 divided by 2, would return 2. Remainder, now let's take a different set of numbers for this, such as 10, percentage sign for remainder, 4. Now what would the remainder in this scenario be? Now, if you look at 2 times 4, that would give you 8. Now, if you were to try and add another 4 to this, you would get 12. And 12 is greater than 10, but 8 is less than 10. So what you're looking for is the difference in between that, between 8 and 10, which is 2. Hence, the remainder for this function is 2. Alternatively, you could just think of this as mod or remainder as you learned in school. Exponent is 2 star star 4, which would be 2 to the power of 4, which is 16. Next, we have comparison operators. Comparison operators such as checking if something is equal, checking if something is not equal. Also, for not equal, you could use this. Checking if something is less than, checking if something is greater than, checking if something is greater than or equal to, and checking if something is less than or equal to. So let's say 2 is equal to 4. Now this would return false because obviously 2 is not 4. If you write 2 is equal to 2, this would return true. Now let's test out not equal. If you were to write 2 is not equal to 4, 4, this would return true. We're going to test out 2 is not equal to 4. This would also return true. We're going to test out 2 is not equal to 2. This would return false because 2 is 2. Then there's less than, which you could use 2 less than 4, which would return true. Greater than, which is 2 greater than 4, would return false. You could do 4 is greater than 2, which would return true. Then there's less than or equal to, less than and equal to, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. And these are done by, example, 4 is less than or equal to 4, which would return true. As we do 4 is less than or equal to 8, which would return true as well. If we were to try 4 is less than or equal to 2, you would get false. Note that the equal sign comes after the less than sign. Similarly, for greater than, you could type 4 is greater than or equal to 2, which would return true. 2 is greater than or equal to 4, which would return false. You could try 2 is greater than or equal to 2, which would return true, because this has an equals case. Alright, so now that we're done with operators, let's take a look at variable types. There are a few in Python, such as integers, floating point numbers, strings, booleans, and lists. An integer is a number without a decimal value, such as 4, 5, 6, 10,000. A floating point number has decimal places, such as 3.0, 4.5, 7.234, 3.14159. A string is written in quotations, such as this is a string. A Boolean is a true or false value. So a Boolean variable could either be true or it could be false. Lists are something we'll get into later, but a list in Python would work like this. It would be square bracket, variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, variable n, close bracket. Now this is a list of variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, and variable n. Alright, well that covers variables. Now let's talk about assigning variables. Let's say you wanted f to be equal to 4 plus 4. Well, it's as simple as that. Now f is equal to 8. Now, one thing you might want to look at for documentation purposes is commenting. To comment in Python, you would use the pound sign or hashtag, whatever you want to refer to it as. So if you use two hashtags, you can type this is a comment and will not be computed. So you could write, in this case, f will be 8. Next, let's take a look at predefined functions. Now, Python comes with a bunch of predefined functions, such as absolute. So if we were to take the absolute of negative 4.2, this would produce 4.2. If you were to take the length, now length is kind of tricky. Well, not really, actually, it's quite simple. It would start with len, and this would be your variable. Now, length could either be a string or a list. And if you were to put in a string, such as, let's say, the word bookkeeper, what would this produce? This would produce 10, because there are 10 characters in bookkeeper. Let's say you were to calculate the length of a bookkeeper. Now you would think that this would return 9, but you have to account for the space as a character. So in this case, it would return 12. There are also other predefined functions such as type, which in this case would return type int, max, which would consume a list such as 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10,000. 1,000, and would produce the maximum of that list, which in this case is 1,000. Now, Python has quite a few predefined functions, and if you were to look for something, I suggest you take a look at Python's documentation, as it's very comprehensive. So now let's take a look at modules. Python doesn't include many functions such as square root, or factorial, or sine or cos. And to use something like that, you would have to import a module. Luckily, Python already comes with the math module. You just have to import it. So at the header of your program, you would write import math. And to calculate, for example, the square root of 25, you would write math.square root 25. To calculate the factorial, you write math.factorial 25. Note that it's math.the command. Math is obviously referring to the module, and factorial is referring to the command within the module. You would have to look at what the math module offers to see what you can or cannot do. Next, let's take a look at local variables. Now, local variables exist within a function and only within a function. So let's create a function. Let's create add function, which consumes argument 1, argument 2, and argument 3, which in this case, let's just say they're integers. Now what we want to do is produce the sum of all three numbers. So let's say arg1 plus arg2 plus arg3. And we can say that sum, or total sum, is equal to that. Now, if you were to end the program right here, it wouldn't output anything. It would calculate total sum, store it in the variable, but it wouldn't output the value. To do that, we would have to return total sum. Alternatively, if you wanted to print total sum, if you wanted to see it as an output over here, you would have to write print total sum. Note that return has to be the last line of your function. You cannot write, for example, print total sum after return. It would be invalid and it would not work. It would not print, sorry. One thing you want to consider about Python is its indentation. With Python, indentation matters. So for example, if we were to write this function like this, it would not run. Let's take a look. Indentation error. Expected an indented block in line 2, which is right here. Let's indent this and run. And now it runs. So, just to show you that it outputs what we want it to, I will add print total sum, and we will call this function. To call a function, you would write add underscore function, which is the function name, open bracket the variables, which let's say is 5, 4, 3, and enter. Now, this returned 12, and it printed 12, which is exactly what we wanted. One thing, actually we're running out of time, so I'll end this tutorial here, and we'll speak about if statements in the next tutorial. See you then.